my new postcard wall. What do you guys think? I kind of like the way it stair steps up the wall. Lots of favorite cards and postcards from travels and different places I've been. Postcards are one of the best souvenirs because they're so cheap, and then when you get home, you can do a fun display.
Why, hello there friends, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. Since we're about halfway through September, I figured it was about time to get my August reading vlog done. Wanted to fill you guys in on the books I've been enjoying. If you caught my reading quotation journal catch-up video, then you'll have gotten a little taste of what I've been reading this month. I finally got the summer months added and all of my favorite quotations from the books I've been reading. My August spread was inspired by Dynamite by BTS, which came out last month. It's such a cute song and I've been enjoying all of their performances so much. It was so exciting when the music video first came out. The quotes on my BTS inspired page were from Treasure Island and He Leadeth Me. I did finish both of these in the month of August. Treasure Island, this is a fun edition that you might have seen if you watched my New England travel vlogs. My cousin and I went to New England in the fall a couple of years ago, and we went to, I think it was called Sheaf Street Books. It was this really cute used bookshop in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and this fun edition of Treasure Island caught my eye, but I hadn't broken it in yet, so it was really fun to read it. Long John Silver, who now of course is best known for his fish restaurant chain. I'm pretty sure Long John Silver is original to Treasure Island. I think that Robert Louis Stevenson originally wrote this as like kind of stories to tell his stepson. Oh, what was the name of his wife? My mom read the letters or biography possibly of his wife. It sounds like she was a really neat woman, and my mom was telling me about her life with Robert Louis Stevenson, and I think that it was her son that he would tell these stories to, and eventually he wrote them down in a book. It is just such a great summer escape. Lots of very piratey language, lots of nautical and navigational language about, you know, moving the ship and getting across the ocean. Just a very immersive story. Really takes you to Treasure Island for an adventure with the Buccaneers. And then He Leadeth Me is by Father Walter Chiswick, an extraordinary testament of faith. Just before World War II, Father Walter Chiswick felt this really strong call to go to Russia to try to minister to the people as a priest. And of course, Catholic priests were not allowed in Russia at that time, so he snuck in, he got captured, he spent 4 years in prison, then he spent many years in the labor camps in Siberia. He eventually made it back to the US on a prisoner exchange. That experience obviously could just destroy you and embitter you, but it seems like for Father Walter Chiswick, it really just kind of stripped away everything unnecessary, and his faith just became simple and rock solid and just kind of going deep down to like the things that really matter. I really liked how he talked about finding God's will, because in one sense he felt God wanted him to be in Russia, but obviously in another sense he still had to get through these insane day-to-day trials and tribulations. I realized I had been trying to do something with my own will and intellect that was at once too much and mostly all wrong. God's will was not hidden somewhere out there in the situations in which I found myself. The situations themselves were his will for me. What he wanted was for me to accept these situations as from his hands, to let go of the reins and place myself entirely at his disposal. He was asking of me an act of total trust, allowing for no interference or restless striving on my part, no reservations, no exceptions, no areas where I could set conditions or seem to hesitate. He was asking a complete gift of self, nothing held back. It demanded absolute faith, faith in God's existence, in his providence, in his concern for the minutest detail, in his power to sustain me, and in his love protecting me. It's so easy to think of God's will as something like you have to find. It's like you're waiting to see kind of the whole map, like the path stretching out ahead of you so that you can see, see where it's going. But it's Father Chiswick's point that God's will is really just here and now. It's the 24 hours in front of you. It's the problem that you're facing right now, not the problem that you're imagining you're going to face tomorrow or the worries about what you went through yesterday. It's just the task at hand. Anyway, I would highly recommend He Leaveth Me.
I've been rereading Jane Austen's letters lately. You know, I'm not sure I've ever actually just read them all chronologically. I always tend to just kind of pick a random year and dip in, and I always find something funny. Jane Austen's voice in her letters is just the same as it is in her novels, and she has such a funny sense of humor. Most of the letters that we have are letters she wrote to her sister Cassandra. I love how she opens this letter. My expectation of having nothing to say to you after the conclusion of my last seems nearer truth than I thought it would be, for I feel to have but little. I need not therefore be above acknowledging the receipt of yours this morning, or of replying to every part of it which is capable of an answer, and you may accordingly prepare for my ringing the changes of the glads and sorries for the rest of the page. I like later down on the page she says, Mrs. Lee did not make the slightest allusion to my uncle's business, as I remember telling you at the time, but you shall hear it as often as you like. I like Jane's sort of subtle snark here, reminding her sister, hey, you know, I did already tell you that. Here she's talking about plants that they're getting for a new garden, and she's getting Syringa? For the sake of Cooper's line. I need to read more of Cooper. Cooper was one of her favorite poets. I am sorry I have affronted you on the subject of Mr. Moore, but I do not mean ever to like him. And as to pitying a young woman merely because she cannot live in two places at the same time and at once enjoy the comforts of being married and single, I shall not attempt it, even for Harriet. You know how interesting the purchase of a sponge cake is to me. Well, I have in fact finished the scarf. I was pretty nervous at the end there, and actually I did not quite have enough red thread, so I kind of had to finish it off early. But you actually almost can't tell. It looks really beautiful. I've been working on this for such a long time. Like, I probably showed this in a vlog like a year and a half ago. I might have been working on this for 2 years. Not continuously, but sporadically. Like, I would pick it up and then put it down. But now this feels like perfect timing. It's all finished in time for fall. It'll be a great shawl slash scarf to wear. I have some coffee here. No, I am not going to spill it. And some books I thought I would catch you guys up on. So I reread The Scent of Water by Elizabeth Goudge this month. It had been a while since I reread this one, and I just enjoyed it so much. I had underlined lots of different, well, of course now I'm not seeing any of them, but I have underlined in the past different passages, lines, and so it was fun to come back and see them again and remember what stood out to me last time, and I underlined some new lines, of course. So this is about a kind of middle-aged career woman in London who ends up inheriting a house in the countryside, and she just feels really strongly that she's meant to, you know, leave her job and move to the house and, you know, get to know all the people in the village. Elizabeth Goudge does such a great job drawing her characters so beautifully and so fully, and even like the houses that they live in and the surroundings. There's just such a depth to everything. I loved this line. What I seek is the goodness of God that waters the dry places, and water overflows from one dry patch to another, and so you cannot be selfish in digging for it. So Mary is the woman who inherits the house, and she inherits it from her cousin Mary, but her cousin, who's passed away, left these diaries. So it's really fun that Mary kind of gets to know her namesake by reading her diaries. There's a family with children that live next door. It's really fun to hear about how they kind of resent the newcomer to the house because they've sort of co-opted the garden. They play in it all the time, and they're afraid that Mary will drive them out. But she doesn't. She's so sweet to the kids. The garden is not taken from you. We'll share it together, but it will really be yours, and I will only come work in it and sit on the lawn because you allow me to. One of the kids, the little boy, thinks of the garden as like the sea. And I like this. Out of the tail of her eye, Mary saw him disappear over the windowsill, a green figure instantly absorbed in the sea green of the conservatory. It was as though a small wave had rejoined its element. He was in a sailing boat, and for him there was no door. The garden wall was a high wave, curved to break, but his little craft went up it, hovered dangerously at the top, and then slithered down the other side. He had seen the other ship from Neptune's quarterdeck. He had known at once who she was. The Victory, and her captain was his friend. She was home from the West Indies with spices in her hold. He's going to visit another house, the Hepplewhites, which I liked the description of the Hepplewhites. I don't think I noticed them as much on my previous read. Here's how the Hepplewhites strike Mary when she meets them. She did not know if she liked or disliked him, for he did not allow her to find out. His presentation was too dazzling for her to be aware, as with Mrs. Hepplewhite, of the person behind the personage. Perhaps there wasn't one. Perhaps Mr. Hepplewhite was dead. It was a startling thought, but he had a different back view, and she found the remembrance of it oddly reassuring. Well, Mr. Hepplewhite is actually not a great character. He's a business magnate and does not have the best scruples. So Mr. Hepplewhite bought the local manor, but there's some things money can't buy. Technically, this would probably belong to Mr. Hepplewhite. In any other sense, Mr. Baker held it in direct tenure from his god. I love that. Life is not very pleasant for poor Mrs. Hepplewhite. She really loves her husband. She married him before he became rich, and this new life doesn't really suit her, and the way her husband has changed. She's having a pretty hard time, and this voice inside is telling her, well, why do you even care? Just stop loving him, be indifferent, be angry, just don't care. So for a minute she decides, okay, yeah, I'll just be indifferent. I'll be kind of empty inside. While she mechanically poured herself out a cup of tea and added a lump of sugar, she realized that it had begun again, strange and deep. It was not over after all. She had not decided. This was another voice, and she was being given another chance. If she became indifferent, she would be like Julie, who did not care in the least what suffering she caused. You've only given yourself one lump of sugar. Dolly took 3. Mrs. Hepplewhite discovered that her slumped position in the armchair had caused her corsets to dig most uncomfortably. She sat up, braced herself to accept their discipline once more, and helped herself to 2 more lumps of sugar. This is one of my favorite Elizabeth Goudge lines, and I had forgotten that it came from this book. If one's intellectual equipment was not great, one's spiritual experience not deep, the result of doing one's best could only seem very lightweight in comparison with the effort involved. But perhaps that was not important. The mysterious power that commanded men appeared to him to ask of them only obedience and the maximum of effort, and to remain curiously indifferent to the results. Yes, I would highly, highly recommend The Scent of Water. This is, I think, a pretty good place to start with Elizabeth Goudge. She's maybe most well known for The Little White Horse, which is a children's book that's also charming. But I would say either this one, The Scent of Water, or A City of Bells. A City of Bells I also absolutely love. But either one would be a great place to start. And then I have another favorite author here, D.E. Stevenson. So I mentioned a couple months ago I read Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End. And those two kind of go together. They're about the same character. Belle Lamington is the heroine. But the Belle goes to Scotland on a vacation and she meets lots of different characters. And it felt like we must know these characters from some past stories. And so I looked it up and actually, oh, those aren't by D.E. Stevenson. But I wonder if there's a list in here. Yeah, here we go. So there's Belle Lamington and Fletcher's End. Those go together. But the characters from this trilogy, Victoria Cottage, Music in the Hills, and Winter and Rough Weather, are in Belle Lamington. I have actually read all 3 of them this summer, which has been really fun. I think, though, Winter and Rough Weather has been my favorite. I guess seasonally, it wasn't really the best time to read it, but there was kind of a mystery in Music in the Hills, the second one, that came to fruition in Winter and Rough Weather, and that was really fun to see. The heroine in this one is Rhoda. It was reading about Rhoda in Belle Lamington that made me want to find out if Rhoda had her own book, so this is really Rhoda's book. She is a painter, and it's so fun to hear her descriptions when she's setting out to paint, and she's setting up a new house in Scotland. The only complaint I would make about these is that Victoria Cottage and Music in the Hills both end incredibly abruptly. Like, almost before the characters get a happy ending. Like, you can see that the happy ending is like right there on the horizon, and then D. Stevenson just ends it. And it's like, you couldn't have given us a little more, but I guess it was a trilogy. Maybe she knew she was writing 2 more books. This one didn't have a very abrupt ending because I think so many things had already gotten tied up in the past 2 books. But yes, if you're looking for a Scottish escape, I would highly recommend those 3. I've never been to the Highlands or the kind of wild parts of Scotland. I've only been to Edinburgh, and it was for such a quick visit because I was flying out of that city. I actually just posted my throwback travel vlog from Edinburgh, so I'll make sure I'll link that up above if you want to go check it out. But yes, it was fun to take another trip to Scotland. Another Scottish work that I finished recently was the Biography of St Margaret. It had been on my list to look this up for ages. I found it on the Kindle store. It was only about $5. This biography was written by, I think, Bishop Turgot. It was a bishop who knew her. So from the 11th or 12th century, St. Margaret was a queen of Scotland, and she was actually originally from England. I think she was a Saxon princess. She was actually shipwrecked in Scotland, but then of course she ends up marrying the king, and she marries Malcolm. So Duncan's son, Duncan from Macbeth, the deposed king from Macbeth, his son was her husband. I kind of was hoping this biography would have more about that, like more about her adjusting to life in Scotland and how she first, met the king. But this was more about her life as queen. This was written hundreds and hundreds, almost 1,000 years ago. So like stylistically, there are going to be things that maybe don't speak to a modern reader in the same way they would have spoken to a reader of that time. Some of the praises of her were a little bit too studied. Like, they were a little bit sort of Mr. Collins-esque. I mean, she was a saint. She was obviously a very holy person, but some of the descriptions of her were just so generic. But there were some specifics in there too. It sounds like she was quite a tough lady. Apparently she would try to find out when there were English prisoners in Scotland, like in Scottish dungeons, and then she would go to that Scottish castle and say, look, you gotta let my countrymen free. Possibly my favorite part was about a bookish miracle. So apparently St. Margaret had this gospel book, like a beautifully, kind of embossed, like the Book of Kells, like beautifully decorated book of different gospel reflections. And she would bring it with her when she went traveling. And one time the servant who was carrying it was not careful enough, and he dropped it into a river. Of course, since travel took so long, the book was there in the riverbed underwater for several days, but when they went back to go and try to find it, they found it in the river. It was as good as new, which I just think is pretty awesome. I found this book on Amazon actually that's called St. Margaret's Gospel Book. I was tempted to buy it, but it's kind of expensive. From the description, it sounded like the book might be actual scans of St. Margaret's Gospel Book, which I think is at the Bodleian Library right now, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool if you could actually see the Bible verses and see the illustrations. But then one of the reviews said that actually it wasn't that, it was more a scholarly work about gospel books of that period, so St. Margaret's as well as other gospel books. I mean, I think St. Margaret's Gospel Book was fairly short. I don't think it was very long, but I wish I could find out how much of St. Margaret's actual gospel book is referenced in in this book. I could try to find it at the library, although these days obviously library going is not as possible. You know, I feel like I didn't appreciate the library as much before, because whenever there was a book that I just wanted to kind of check out, like get a taste of it before I actually bought it, you know, decide if I really wanted it on my shelf, like I would go and get it at the library. And of course that has not really been possible for many months. Obviously you can get ebooks through your library, and actually one ebook that I was able to get through my library was the Memoirs of Lady Hagyong. So this is a memoir set in the Joseon period, so it's nonfiction. It's the 1700s in South Korea. So going from a Queen of Scotland to a Queen of South Korea. I mentioned this in my last month's reading wrap up, but Lady Hagyong lived quite a life. There was quite a lot of intrigue in the royal court. Her husband was kind of crazy. I've just started it and I am just about at Lady Hagyong's wedding, so I'm not actually at the crazy part yet. But it sounds like she came from a really loving, like grounded family, and she was really sad to leave it. I really like her kind of narrative style, like the way she remembers what growing up was like, what her family was like. It just really brings her to life and brings you right into that period. It helps you imagine what it would have been like, so I'm really looking forward to finishing that. Another book that I mentioned in last month's reading vlog was The Miracles of the Namiya General Store by Keigo Higashino. See, this one I couldn't find an ebook of it through my library, and I downloaded the sample of it from Google Play Books, and I got to the end of the sample and I'm still trying to decide. It's the kind of thing I would normally get at the library, but I am enjoying it, so I guess I should just buy it so that I can finish it. There are these three criminals who are on the run and trying to escape from the police, and they end up in this abandoned general store. And in the past, people would write anonymous letters to the owner of this general store, and he would write them back and like just kind of help them with their problems, and letters start appearing while these guys are hiding out. And at first they're super freaked out, like, do the police know we're here? Like, is someone messing with us? Look at what's on the top selling ebooks on Google Play. Dune. It's probably because the trailer just came out. My brothers and I did react to it. I have the paperback of Dune right here on my shelf. Actually, I've been meaning to order the other sequels because they do have, I have the first 3 Dune novels, but I think they do have these same like kind of covers in some of the sequels, and I just love this style. They look so cool. I would love to have all of them on my shelf. So I guess I'll wrap this reading vlog up here. As always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed. I hope you're having a magical and a bookish day, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.